Hey, guys, Guy here. It is Tuesday morning after a big Monday night, and I wanted to play for you the sounds, the comments of Matt Mayoko. Matt was the guy who had the report, who wrote the story on Monday night that the 49ers had a trade in place, or a framework for a trade in place with the Browns and with the Patriots, and that it was up to Aiyuk to make a decision about which team he wanted to play for. And the theory last night was, well, he doesn't want to play for either one of those teams. He wants to play for the Steelers or the Commanders. And well, the Niners don't have a deal in place with those two teams. So my feeling yesterday was it was a way for the 49ers to try and back him into a corner, a way for John Lynch to say, enough, enough of this already. Let's make a decision here. So we went through that report, right? Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com, who covers the Browns, said if you're doing a Browns deal, Amari Cooper, a lot of people had said Kendrick Bourne, Patriots. Kendrick Bourne's coming off an ACL. But I said on Monday night, well, if they're desperate enough to throw their first round pick in, trading Brandon Aiyuk the second week of August is an L. Not trading him before the draft means you are keeping him this year. So trading him at this point is an L. You subtract from your team. You make your team worse. If you get Amari Cooper on paper, you're probably going to get some similar production. But he's not the same type of player that Aiyuk is. He certainly doesn't have the equity that Aiyuk does. I don't know that he's the kind of guy that would get the equity quickly. Aiyuk's a blocker. Aiyuk's a grinder. Aiyuk is all of those things. And Amari Cooper's a very good receiver, but I've never heard grinder associated with him as a point of the way he plays. Anyway, this is what Matt Mayoko has said. This is what he said on NBC Sports Bay Area on his 49ers Talk podcast about the situation.
I still think that it is a legitimate option or possibility that Brandon Aiyuk remains with the 49ers. Because at this point, I'm not sure that he wants to play in Cleveland. I'm not sure he wants to play in New England. In fact, I kind of, reading the tea leaves, I kind of believe he doesn't want to play at those spots.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty fair. I mean, the reports are that there have been a New England offer kind of out there going all the way back to the draft, and that if he wanted the money that they were offering, he could take it, right? I mean, part of the reason there's a framework in place in terms of trades with those teams, the agent, Ryan Williams, also has access to those teams, right? He has permission to negotiate. He knows where they can get what deal. And now the Niners know where he can get what deal. Now, I know there are some people who cover the Steelers. I think it's Andrew Filipponi, who does radio in Pittsburgh, who has put out his theory, which is that it's all a tactic by the Niners, not to back Aiyuk into a corner as much as it is to get the Steelers to pay more. Aiyuk wants to be there; they want him, but their offer just is not acceptable. You know, it's hard around the draft. You can start really manipulating trade offers because there's so many combinations of picks. Once we get to August 6th, which is where we stand today, there's a little less flexibility. You know, there's only so many players. The Niners are asking for, all right, we want this guy. We want Joey Porter Jr. And the Steelers are like, no, we don't want to give you Joey Porter Jr. And then I just go, okay, then we don't have a deal. And then somebody says, well, all right, what if we gave you Aiyuk? What if you gave us Aiyuk in a first for Joey Porter Jr. in a fifth? And the Niners go, I'm just making all of this up. I'm just saying there's only so many combinations. All right, we don't want to, because that could happen, right? You could see that combination of things occurring where you go, all right, we want one of your better players, Pittsburgh, because you're asking for one of our best players. And Pittsburgh goes, all right, well, give us a first round pick with Aiyuk. You're like, wait a second, who's trading for who now? No, we don't want to do that. So anyway, that's one of the theories, right? Is that this is an act to get the Steelers to raise their offer. I think there's a lot of logic there that may be true, and that may be the end. That may be how this whole thing plays out. But it's a reminder that when you're under contract in the NFL, you are not necessarily in control. You have some control, you have some leverage, but it's not the NBA. And ultimately, you can't just not show up. You can't. I mean, you can, and you lose a year of service time eventually. I think we determined a while back it was miss up to 7 or 8 games, something like that, without losing the service time. But if you basically if you stay out the whole time, then you're 1 year further away from free agency. That's not even a real conversation. That's not happening. But I still think, and what Mayoko said there was, I guess I should have reacted to what Mayoko said there, which was he still thinks it's a real possibility he ends up back on the 49ers. I still think that's the outcome the Niners want. I think it's why we're doing this. It's why they're doing this, because the outcome they want is for Brandon Aiyuk to be on the team, and they just want this thing to resolve itself. The question is, do they want it to resolve itself more than they want him on the team? This is what Tim Kawakami tweeted about on Monday night, right? Don't do deals out of frustration. If you're doing something out of frustration, especially when you still have a month before the season, if you're doing things out of frustration, then you're doing things for the wrong reasons. So that's the question right now with John Lynch and Parag and Kyle. Where are they at? I don't think, as someone who's been pro Aiyuk and pro Ricky Pearsall, I've not seen anything that suggests Ricky Pearsall's about to take over from Brandon Aiyuk. I went back and watched. There was some last night. We did a big stream last night that did not end up in the podcast feed, and the reason was it was such a shit show of a podcast. Like I generally put anything that we do on YouTube up on the podcast feed, unless I think that if you click on it, it's going to be just too all over the place for you as a listener. And it's almost, I want to respect your time and your trust that if you click, you're getting something podcast worthy. And while I think Monday Night Show was really good, it was a lot of reading comments, going back and forth, silence as you're looking through a story, that sort of thing. This will go on the podcast. But last night was at last check, I think it was 17,000 views on YouTube for Monday night for that show. So that was a fun show. And we went through a lot of things, and a lot of, everybody had opinions, and we covered a lot of the topics. We didn't have that quote from Mayoko. That's new-ish. That got posted this morning. But we did go through Matt's story. And then after the show, it wasn't that late. It was like 9:30. Kind of awake now. The juices are flowing. So somebody had posted last night. I watched 2 old NFL games, 7-minute basically highlights. Well, one wasn't old. One was Favre's first game against the Packers as a Viking. I think it was Monday Night Football. So it was Favre versus Rodgers. And that thing had a bunch of views. So some of you listening or watching this have already have watched that in the last day or two. And it was really an amazing display for the whole, arm strength. Why do people value arm strength? If you're new here, I think I'm pro Brock Purdy, but I also am anti people pretending like physical traits are irrelevant. Go watch the highlights of Rodgers versus Favre. It is 98-mile-an-hour fastball after 98-mile-an-hour fastball, and a lot of them were necessary. Then I also saw in my feed, this is the best for me, this is the best of Twitter. Show me 5 to 7 minute game recaps of classic games that, are from last year or 10 years ago. And Packers-Niners playoff game came across my feed last night. And I'm watching it. That's an immediate click. And I'd forgotten, or at least I wasn't thinking about, I remembered at the moment I saw it. The Aiyuk had a third down catch over the middle that was very contested with a defensive player right on his back. And I think sometimes with Aiyuk, for me at least, when you start talking about contracts, you start talking so much about production in volume. Well, 17.9 and 1,400 yards and 72 catches and whatever. And, no, it's incredible. And the metrics and the blah, 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 blah. Crunch time, balls on him. Does he make that play? It was a hell of a catch. And I know people go to the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, I think, has clouded people's judgment a little bit. Well, Aiyuk didn't get open and Debo didn't get open. And, the third down play at the end, Purdy picked the wrong guy, but Aiyuk wasn't open. And I've watched this guy night in, night out in a bunch of big games. Just because you don't win the biggest game doesn't mean you don't show up. Doesn't confirm, right? Oh, he doesn't show up in big games. He shows up in big games. Don't go pull a box. Go watch. The Chiefs beat the 49ers. Spagnuolo beat Kyle. Their DBs were elite. They don't return all those guys, by the way. I think it's easy. You look at one game and go, I can't win the big game. Can't get open. I don't know. Go watch a season-long highlight or something, and you'll see this guy make a ton of plays after a ton of plays. So that doesn't mean pay him whatever he wants. It doesn't mean he's worth Justin Jefferson's contract or maybe even DJ Moore's contract. But it's just like, let's chill on the extremes of what he can't do. That's all. Comment, 49ers are the TMZ of the offseason. Well, know this. Now, I don't think this deal's happening because Aiyuk doesn't want it to happen, and this probably isn't even the offer. But if the Patriots, because they've got a young quarterback in Drake May, and they really have no receivers. They got Jalen Polk, who apparently has looked good in camp from Washington, rookie. They took him in the second round. They got Kendrick Bourne coming off in an ACL. He had a nice year last year. But with an older owner who may be a little desperate to try and get good again because he's tasted champagne, and right now he's got the banquet beer, with all due respect. If they get desperate enough to trade you first, which I'd be surprised if that was on the table, but let's just say, then you go, oh, that's kind of a sweet deal. If that were to happen, get ready for TMZ 2025 also. But that's a story for another time. Stephen Ramsey on the stream says, BA is him, but I think he played himself. It's time for the real decisions now. We've seen this enough. We've seen the deleting of the pictures. Am I allowed to do that? The deleting of the pictures. No, is the answer. The deleting of the pictures. We've seen the IG, the cryptic posts. We've seen the interviews. We've all seen it. John Lynch has seen it. But I think this is the 49ers way of saying, all right, playtime is over. It's time to make some real hard, at some point we got to make some real hard decisions. And this is going to end with compromise. Even if he gets traded, it's some sort of, the 49ers then compromise their team. But there is no scenario here that everybody gets everything that they want and that they've been asking for. It's not happening. Judon, Bourne, a second and a third. There are some deals out there that you hear them and you go, not the worst thing I've ever heard. Comment, NFL is not loyal to players, so why not get what you can while your production is up? Absolutely. It's fine. I think there's always this, push and pull of people understanding that, wanting to be pro player, but also they have a team they root for, right? People, the thing I don't understand is when people don't understand why fans side with teams for the most part over players. Well, because that's their team, A. B, because we generally look at sports through the eyes of, if I were the general manager, if I were the coach, how would I handle this? I can't believe how many of you are like, I was talking to Jeff Schwartz the other day, who's been on the show before, and he was explaining to me how in the new NCAA video game, he's the offensive coordinator at I think Iowa. He's like, oh, I don't recruit. I'm in year 2. I'm not recruiting because I plan on leaving. Like you play the video game not from the position of the player, but from the position of the shot caller. And that's how we look at teams too. So the NFL's not low to players, so why not get you can while your production is up? Absolutely. I understand that. We understand that. I think on the flip side of what I just said, fans sometimes go too far where it's like, hey man, just take $2 million left over the course of this 5-year contract per year. Like, okay, well, that is $10 million. Like, let's not ignore that it's $10 million, right? But you also have to acknowledge that it's not entirely up to the player to get as much as they can get. If you're willing to go through the 5th-year option and 2 years of the franchise tag, and then you can become a true free agent. But, only one guy really has done that. And that was Cousins. We're having this conversation while paying Purdy $1 million per year. Yeah, I mean, look, Brock's going to get his soon, but we're still a couple years away from Brock's cap number actually being, $50 million. So right now it feels like 2024 is at risk. It's possible that not only is 2024 not at risk, but 2025 is not at risk. Comment from Ron. Says, Guy, what do you think about trading BA for a great offensive lineman? That's their weakness. Well, there's not a lot of evidence that the 49ers value that other than with Trent. And we'll see how much they value it with Trent. But I think if the Niners view Aiyuk as a great trade asset, which I don't, I mean, I know they've got offers they like from 2 teams. So, there's maybe 4 teams in on this thing to begin with. But if they view him as a valuable trade asset, I think they'd rather have like a first than an offensive lineman. Unless you told them they were getting Tristan Wirfs. Unless they think they're getting Trent Williams' replacement, I don't think that does much for them. The evidence tells us that they view it like they can kind of piecemeal an offensive line and be good enough. I think they would not view that as value. I think you got to look at it like, okay, let's say they get a first for him, which is not likely, especially now. But let's just say. And let's say that first is the 27th pick. They didn't seem to think any offensive linemen at the end of the first round were worthy of taking. Like they could have had a first round offensive lineman in 2024. They didn't take one. They didn't like any of them. Go listen to what Kyle Shanahan told Kawakami. He's like, yeah, I mean, if you don't think these guys are going to be any good, I'm paraphrasing, then what's the point? If it's going to be a few years before they're ready, is really what he was saying. Like, if you don't think they're going to be good now. So, I mean, yeah, in theory, I just think a lot of the linemen that you guys like, that you think like, oh, that'd be an upgrade. I don't think they look at it that way. Comment, I don't want a malcontent on the team. Well, if he's back and he has signed a contract, then he's probably not a malcontent, right? Has anyone been mad when they sign a contract that has like $80 million guaranteed, 70 million, whatever the number ends up being? I mean, you could be pissed about it, but then you're like, oh my God, I just checked the direct deposit. And then the flip side of that is, let's say he's like, I don't want to go to either of these teams, but I also don't want to sign your extension. I'm going to play this year on the 5th-year option. And then maybe you're more likely to trade me a place I want to go next year. Now he's It's bad. It's a bad mental place to be. I'll acknowledge that's not a great place to be. But he will be in a contract year. Like, in order to get traded for a contract that he wants, he has to perform. That said, it's not the greatest headspace to have a player in if we're just talking about the reality of, human beings. So it's fair. I don't think he'll. I don't know. It'd be a little interesting. It'd be dicey if he does the 5th-year option thing. Which, by the way, this is a good chance to remind everybody. Let me take a moment to tell you that back when this whole conversation started, I said that I thought the most likely outcome, and this was not a guess, I was not pulling this out of thin air, but I was told that it was a real possibility that Aiyuk would have to play on his 5th-year option this year. And I said that. I said, I think the most likely outcome here is that he plays on his 5th-year option. That was several months ago. I don't think that's the most likely option now. Remember yesterday when Mike Garafolo said this?
What seems to be clear is that if and when he is traded, and I would say we're closer to a trade than we are to him staying in San Francisco at this.
That was yesterday. And, do with that what you will. But, does he have the mettle to go, fine, I'm staying and I'm playing on the 5th year and we can do this later? Is that good for anybody? They want that? Maybe they don't want that. But there's just not a lot. There's not a lot out there. They didn't like any of the offensive linemen available at 31. Yeah, they didn't love it. They tried to trade out of the pick. They wanted to trade back. They couldn't, so they drafted Ricky Pearsall. Now they might actually need him. Hey, while you're here, hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube. Appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that very much. A reminder that this show is sponsored in part by CIRCA Survivor and CIRCA Million contest in Vegas, $16 million in guaranteed prizes. The CIRCA Million contest, that's where you pay $1,000 to enter. You pick 5 games a week against the spread. Best record at the end wins it all. Worst record gets a booby prize of $100,000. Then there's the CIRCA Survivor, $10 million guaranteed to the winner or winners. Last year, the pot was $9.2 million. It's gone up. It was split 4 ways at $2.3 million each. Enter in Nevada. You get signed up either in Reno or in Vegas at CIRCA Sports. They sign you up with a proxy, and then you play from anywhere. Visit circasports.com and click on contest. That's circasports.com and click on contests. 49ers, if you're listening to this early, practice Tuesday after an off day Monday. Question from David: why doesn't he play the 5th-year option out and wait for a bigger payday next year? Because it's risky. I mean, it is a significant pay increase this year for him, but it's risky. You get hurt when you could have signed a contract, that guaranteed you $75 million. Let's just say, I'm picking a number. You could have signed that contract, and instead you decided not to because you wanted to pursue $85 million. And then you get hurt, or you tear an ACL, which if you do it in September, maybe you can come back from. But, now it's just risk. I mean, that's the reason not to do it is job security. The other reason not to do it, you're not replacing this year of the contract. So in theory, you hit free agency the same time. But, the earlier you do deals, just generally speaking, the earlier you do your next deal. So you want to do your big contract when you're 25, and then you can do another one when you're 29, as opposed to when you're 27 and now you're 32 on that second contract. And, you're not as attractive. Juwan Jennings comment. Jennings is going to earn that new paycheck. Yeah. How big is it? It's very earnable for him. Speaking of a guy who always steps up in big games. I was having the conversation with Lombardi the other day. Will Jennings or Pearsall have more catches this year? I've looked at Pearsall like he's definitely going to have the least of that group of pass catchers. But it's possible that he he's gonna have a shot. It doesn't reduce. Jennings is still just so they don't have another target like him physically. Comment. BA has been running every play in the Diva wide receiver negotiation playbook, and it still doesn't change the fact that the Niners have all the leverage. You know, a player's best leverage is the player that they are. And I do think the 49ers value the player that he is. They thought they'd nailed the value on the player that he is, and then it turned out the receiver market exploded. Maybe there's some fear that the cap won't just go up as much as it did this year, next year. I think Jerry Jones might have alluded to that. I mean, the Taylor Swift effect on the NFL was real on the salary cap. So they got to find ways. Now they are doing things. I mean, they got some Netflix games, and if anybody knows how to always find a way to make more money, it's the NFL. But I don't know. Maybe that's in the back of their mind as well. Ramon says, oops. Where are we at here? Ramon, comment. How do people know that we waited and it wasn't Aiyuk's agent who wanted to wait until other wide receiver deals were done so we could set a high floor in the market? I mean, there was definitely a feeling that people did want to wait. That if you're a receiver, you looked out and you knew Jamar Chase, you knew Justin Jefferson, you knew CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins ended up not doing a deal. So you knew there would be some significant, So yeah, I mean, I think the CD one is definitely one that you could keep waiting on. So there's something to that, but I think the feeling is, and maybe it's not 100% true, but the feeling is just offer your August 5th offer in June, and maybe you get the deal done. May, maybe you get the deal done. And I think the reason that people feel that way is because that feels like that's what happens a lot. This better not be the next excuse for Kyle and Purdy. What excuses has Purdy had? Other than his elbow blew up, which I think I put that in the legitimate category. Comment, Amari Cooper plus a pick is a good deal. We're not losing much, if anything, in terms of talent for a year. On paper, it is a good deal. I agree with that. On paper, you go, all right, but let's put the paper aside for a second. I think there are things he lacked. Now, he may have some things. Somebody might say, well, he actually maybe get open against man coverage better than Aiyuk. But I think he lacks some things in terms of run blocking. Let's start with that. He's not a winner, but I do think Aiyuk's a winner, a dog. He's got some equity in that locker room. People ask me, is this going to affect the locker room? If he resigns, I don't think it does. If he gets traded, it might. That's weird. If you're Kyle Juszczyk, like I took a pay cut so you could trade Aiyuk. My guy, Aiyuk. Juszczyk was on this show with John and I coming off of Aiyuk's rookie year. And he said, I'm telling you, what this guy needs is just a little mentorship. He's a stud. He was effusive. Kyle Juszczyk called his shot on Brandon Aiyuk, and he was right. Kyle Juszczyk did an interview last week wearing a Brandon Aiyuk hat. Kyle Juszczyk took a pay cut this offseason. That's not all about him, but I'm just saying Aiyuk's holdout is not tearing the locker room apart. Trading him, and now you risk doing something in the locker room. Okay, so there's that. There's also the fact that Aiyuk is younger than Jennings. He's younger than Kittle. He's younger than McCaffrey. He's younger than Debo. He's younger than Trent. He's younger than Fred. He's younger than basically every other key support beam on this team that holds the thing up around Brock Purdy. He's the youngest of all of them. And so that means that he is, if you said, all right, look 8 years into the future with Brock Purdy, who's most likely to be a long-standing shoulder-to-shoulder with him? it's Aiyuk. Amari Cooper is older than Brandon Aiyuk. Amari Cooper is in the last year of his contract. Amari Cooper is not part of your future. So that's what you lose if you trade Brandon Aiyuk for Amari Cooper. Yeah, you might still get 75 balls this year and 1,300 yards and 7 touchdowns. You might still get, look, even see people 17 yards per catch. See? Great. Now you got to replace that next year. You're going to extend Amari Cooper? Doesn't seem like the kind of thing they'd want to do. So, yeah, I agree. Like in a bubble, it looks good. But in the big picture, this is the guy that should be with your quarterback for the next 8 years. You got him right now. You're going to spend, just know this. If Ricky Pearsall is not that dude, then you're going to keep trying to find that guy. I was hoping for a trade for Zach Frazier from Pitt. Don't you think a center for the future would have helped immediately? I mean, I kind of wanted them to draft Zach Frazier. I don't think they view it that way. They don't see that as value. They're like, we got a center. It's fine. Comment from Ryan. I want this money or trade me. Oh, but not that team or that team. Yeah, it's a game they're all playing, and they know the deal. Pretty sure Amari Cooper, after dealing with Watson and then lighting it up with the old man Flacco, just wants to QB to get him the damn ball and get a ring. Amari Cooper has managed to play in some of the most dysfunctional situations. I mean, it's incredible. He played for the Raiders. He played for the Cowboys, who win despite being, a little rocky. And he played for the Browns. So on one hand, the Niners look like functional city to him. On the other hand, he'd be like, yeah, I'm used to this attention. It's kind of weird. Is it weird here? I haven't noticed. I'm used to weird. I guess that'd be the good thing. He's used to weird. Comment. Weren't we replacing either Debo or BA next year anyway? At least we get some cap relief and a pick after this year. A lot of people think that. I have not been in the group of people that says that it's a foregone conclusion that Debo Samuel's gone after next year. I have talked about the fact that it's cheap relative to move on from Debo next year if you had to, that you have that flexibility, but I don't think it's a lock. Now, if Aiyuk is, let's just watch the games. Does Debo still look like a stud? Do you think they want to find a way to keep him around? We have to learn from the Buckner situation. We still haven't replaced him doing it by committee. Definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I mean, that is the definition of insanity. I'll say this. I think that gets overused a little bit. Like, there's a salary cap. You have to make hard decisions. You better make the right ones. But you don't get to not make decisions. Not making a decision is a decision. And you don't get to do that. Okay. There's a lot of you here. So if you're here, thank you. Live or after or not live, hit that like button. Appreciate that very much. Question from Zeus coming off topic, but can't wait for you to call Nebraska football. Rule is coming. Dylan Raiola is coming. Hasn't named a starter yet. They got some good skill guys. Defense is looking sweet. I'm going to be there week 3. They play Coach Prime week 2. I'm excited to go to Lincoln to see the Huskers. I'm fired up. Week 3. I'll be there. Big Ten Network. Can't wait. Thank you for the comment. Go ahead and tag BTN in all your excited tweets about it. Let them know. All right. If you're watching, hit that like button. Appreciate it. we'll see what happens later today. Heading out to practice, and never a dull moment. Never a dull moment.